Okay. So obviously, like, the instinct to procreate in order to keep the species alive is not a human trait. Every species on this planet has that to some
It's
degree.
not uniquely human,
It's
yeah.
not uniquely human, but like I'm talking about like because for instance, I had a good point, and then anyway,
I started wiggling.
you started being like, oh my god, let's record this thing. But no, like, okay, like take a dog and a human. Like, what would you consider a human thing to do, and what's that a dog wouldn't have? Because not every alien species out there is going to be higher intelligence, higher this. Like you're going to have alien creatures out there that are like a fucking dog.
Fucking retarded. Um, my dog is always happy. Unless there's a loud noise.
Okay.
And I think that temperament.
Like I feel okay, temperament. I feel like if it's I think that's where, because like if you, especially because there's just I don't know, I'm not able to explain it, but there are just certain things that you just inherently know only a human would do that. You never really suspect another life form would have those little idiosyncrasies. Um,
Well, do you think? Because I think a lot of that is centered around, especially in sci-fi, a lot of that is centered around exploration and this idea that we can't be the only species out there that's really curious about the rest of the universe.
True.
And I think what makes it so not terrifying, but what makes it so engaging or enthralling for people is the idea that there's another form of being that has the same level of intelligence we do, but they're not like us.
Okay, now go to the opposite end of the, not opposite end of the spectrum, but within the same field. But okay, so you have the futuristic sci-fi. Now let's go to the historic fantasy, which most fantasy that I know. I mean, obviously there's modern urban fantasy, but like we're going with like the Tolkien,
We're going with high fantasy.
with the Terry Goodkind, the old high epic fantasy. You create these other species. You got elves, you got orcs, you got dwarves, you got. I mean, they're humanoid. Like they've got the same anatomy
Number of
as humans,
legs and arms, yeah.
but and I think that's probably also where fantasy falls short. Is just everything is humanoid. They don't stretch the boundaries far enough as to where sci-fi does. Where you, like for instance, well, no, not even really with sci-fi. I mean, unless you have, I mean, to an extent.
It depends on the fantasy that you're going toward. Like if you go back into mythology, you'll find all kinds of weird shit.
That's true.
So I really think it depends. Like I really think the state of high fantasy kind of depends on how much of an imagination you have. Like the skulls that I created for Sheever.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how I described those?
A little bit.
That's not something that I've ever seen that lived anywhere else.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I don't know.
That I have a better or more prolific imagination, but that's just what I was going for in terms of Sheever. Like trying to imagine something trying to imagine something that's so far outside the realm of what you might think is possible.
Okay. And maybe it's just, I don't want to say like I've aged out of it, because I did enjoy science fiction a lot more when I was younger. But like I just don't have the time, I guess, to commit myself to going, okay, I'm no longer on Earth. This is what's going on. These are the creatures that inhabit this universe. But to me, like, I don't know, and it probably also has to do with the I had when it came to what I read, which is a little more contemporary, but like I said, has that fractured lens that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Where there's something that's just off. Like to me, that's the ideal setting. Is like, and it's also kind of like using How to Cure. I mean, especially if you're, of a spiritual inclination.
It's definitely heavy Christian overtones.
Well, I know, but like there's a possibility that Darkseers and Lightbringers are here. Like there could be that possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe I like, to me, that's the perfect setting, is where you are familiar with the world, but there's something that's off, but that something that is off could potentially exist if you're.
Well, and that's what made it so much fun. That's what makes those settings so much fun, because, like, for a moment, for just one wild moment, you have to turn off what you've been taught to think as far as what's real and what isn't, and what's possible and what isn't. You have to shut that off, and you have to consider these things in terms of the tangible.
Yeah.
That makes sense? So it's like, these aren't just mythical beings that are kind of floating around out in the ether. Like, they're touch. That's a touch thing. Like, you can touch them. You can fight with them. They'll make you bleed.
Yeah.
And that's really the most appealing thing to me outside of mythology was putting that, because that's such a prevalent thing in mythology.
Yeah.
It was, people believed that those were real things that they could touch if they just found them, or if they just happened to accidentally come across them. And so,
or they're gods, they could actually meet them, have a conversation with them, and then
find out. Yeah. And to take that, and a lot of people, and especially in the modern day, a lot of people really write that off as being nonsensical, or for simple-minded, uneducated folks. And it's like, no, motherfucker. Turn off your academic ego for 5 fucking seconds and just think about it and consider it. What would it mean to you? What would it mean to you to meet a dark?
No, sorry, I did it for 5 seconds. Oh, it's stupid.
But it's that, treating it like it was fucking real, or like they thought it was real. Because these people didn't spend time documenting a bunch of shit just for giggles. Especially when they had to, inscribe it in fucking stone.
Yeah. That takes time.
Or on a clay tablet that they then had to bake. Like, yeah, we're just gonna take this clay and we're gonna write a fucking novel. For no reason. It's gonna go up to the National Archives. We're gonna put it in the legal section. But it's complete fiction.
Well, they probably were like, you know what? There's going to be a Library of Congress someday. Let's make sure this gets.
Let's get ready for that. Yeah, because those people are going to take good care of all their information.
The Mayans already took 2012. Let's take the Library of Congress as our future contribution to society.
I mean,
they got the end of the world. We got preservation. Fuck them.
You know?
You can say Arcadia is a sci-fi novel.
No, it isn't.
But the setting, you could just with the whole simulation theory thing. That's
should we ask Smash Into Pieces if that's what they had in mind?
Fuck you.
Why fuck me? I didn't steal it. Fuck those guys. They stole it.
Now, see those people, they're my Picasso. Shut the fuck up. Their talent was hacked like Picasso. So, anyway.
Fair enough.
Like, some people could say it's a sci-fi novel just because of the whole simulation theory thing, because you can't prove simulation theory. So until then, it's a work of science fiction and imagination.
Cernovich tried to prove simulation theory, and I'll tell you about that when you get done with what you're saying.
But would you say that Arcadia has a setting?
Has a what?
A sci-fi like setting.
It doesn't feel like a sci-fi setting. It feels like a futuristic setting.
Well, some people would say futuristic is sci-fi. I'm like, but it's
not.
It's after World War III technically, and the world's been reduced to dust. So it's not.
Technically, it wasn't even World War III. It was just an accident. Because that's how that whole thing happened in '95, wasn't it? Was that
it was
an accidental miscommunication, or it was
no, it was okay. So there was the Norwegian where Norway launched a rocket that was a weather. It was a weather reporting device to kind of overlook the aurora borealis during that time of year.
Right.
And it was flying over Russian airspace.
Right.
And there was that brief moment where, like, oh fuck, America just launched a nuke from Norway to attack us. So they had their, I think they call their briefcase, if I remember correctly, Chagat or something like that. They had it all primed and ready, but then they got the call. I want to say it was from Bill Clinton himself, like, "Hey, no, it's just a weather rocket. Stop it, Yeltsin, you drunkard." And
call the kettle black.
And yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
So like we were like moments away from being over a fucking weather rocket.
I mean, stupider things have led to longer conflicts. So.
True.
Do you think there are settings that are specific to certain genres? I was thinking about it in the shower.
Obviously, that's okay. You were thinking about specific appropriate settings for certain genres.
While I was pulling loose hair off my head, it occurred to me that, like, there are some genres that come with certain settings, and there are other genres that eschew those settings entirely and simply, like, the obvious one is, like Regency and In a Man's and sci-fi in outer space. But, like, as far as like the finer details, especially something that's a little bit closer to our modern kind of thinking or our modern reading, like, is there a setting, do you think, that works best in a particular type of genre?
Like there would be no crossover necessarily,
or it wouldn't work as well.
I mean, obviously,
out of place. It would be that bit of fractured mirror.
I mean, obviously, interplanetary settings is obviously a sci-fi thing, and it wouldn't work in, say, I mean, yeah, you could say that it's a mystery story set, like, or well, it's like not going with novels, going with film. Like Alien is technically a horror film set in space.
Okay.
So like you can blend elements, but I would say more so like you can blend elements, but like there are like for instance you couldn't do like contemporary sci-fi because those are just contradictory, like because contemporary is happening in the modern. I mean, no, you
unless you rewrote it and
unless you
pretended that it's like it would
like
have to work
time.
in a very specific sense. Like if you wrote it as the
well, I saying that I kind of like again using another film, not a fucking novel. The Terminator series, the films take place in the year that they're released, but you have that futuristic element, that science fiction element in the contemporary setting, which is the Terminator.
Right.
So okay, even
or it's you could pretend it's you'd have to set it up carefully, but call it the long lost diary of some weird uncle you had from a century ago who tried to imagine what life would be like today.
Mm-hmm.
And then build your story off that. Like, obviously, I'm going to leave those details vague so I don't give a bunch of crap away. But you could use a lot of time travel paradoxes.
You could, but then you'll run into the the criticism of like there are too many paradoxes in your like time travel in itself is just a paradox.
It's
like you can't go back. You can't go back because even if you don't do anything, your presence alone
changes.
Like you're bound to just bump into somebody, which will throw the pre-written. Like for instance, someone's just walking to work, and before you showed up in the past, there was no bump that knocks them off. But if you bump into them, they might get hit by a car, which their erasure from the timeline just there would change everything pushing forward of his future interactions that will no longer happen now.
Well, either that, like it could, that's pretty major. Like it could be something minor. Like he bumps into you, he mentions it to somebody else, who mentions it to somebody else, and then before long you end up being sucked into this circle of people who kind of know you're there and they don't really know where you came from.
Yeah. And even in,
which is sort of what happened in Last Action Hero.
Mm-hmm.
Except that, like, that wasn't time travel. That was just, in different dimension.
Yeah. And even if you wouldn't, because people would say like, well, then you can then just go to the future because it hasn't happened yet. I'm like, well, not unless you view time how God views time, which it's all happening at the same time. There's no linear. It's all happening at once. It's already.
You know that because that's something that very often has to be explained to a lot of people.
Raised Mormon. That's a concept that Mormons are taught. If you look at it that way, the future's also already happened. Not to us, but to those people. So your interaction's gonna change something.
Yeah. Well, like, because everybody wants to talk about fate and they want to talk about decision, but then, like, the thing I think that is the most difficult for human beings to grasp is that nothing is set in stone.
Yeah.
And you do have a choice. And I think the thing about time travel that a lot of people want to use or a lot of people try to use is this sort of idea that maybe it won't be, maybe it'll be different.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it won't be like that. And what they don't realize is that it didn't have to be like that. That's just what happened because that's what a person chose.
Yeah. Now, I think the only way that quote unquote time travel would work without that whole.
This sounds like a really simplistic thing that I just said, but it's, think about it and you'll understand.
Yeah. And it's not even, again, time travel, like you said with Last Action Hero, it's, interdimensional shit, is if you were able to access, the parallel universes where things are slightly different.
Right.
But maybe the only one thing that's different is I grew up to become a Catholic priest.
That's actually really funny you say that, because Rick and Morty season 1, they say that exact thing. He's asking little boy's asking his grandpa, what do I do? And Grandpa goes, just treat it like the timeline where Hitler cured cancer. Don't think about it.
Never seen an episode. I've seen clips that you've shown me, but I've never seen an episode of this show.
I genuinely think you would really enjoy.
But you know how I work. If someone suggests something to me,
you have to avoid it as much as you can until they come to your house and sit down with you and go, look at this thing. I promise you'll.
I basically have to be held hostage.
Yeah, pretty much.
Just like you did with me with Sherlock.
I was watching that a few months ago and I realized this is a terrible show.
Yeah.
Stephen Moffat is a terrible writer. The only good episodes were the ones that Mark Gatiss did, and I feel like he did all of the work himself.
How close are you to finishing How to Cure so I can go back and format it?
I'm still trying to fix chapter 31.
Okay.
But I'm trying to make the conversation less. I don't know how you felt about the conversation in chapter 31. But I wasn't quite happy with it, so I'm just trying to fix things.
You're talking between the MC and the MC.
Turney and Graves.
Oh, that's who you're. Oh, what chapter am I thinking of? Am I thinking of 30? Is 30 the Cure of Hope or something like that?
Yes.
Okay, I'm thinking of 30. 31. Okay, so Turney and Graves. Okay, so the whole shoe.
The bit with the shoe.
My shoe. My shoe. He's missing my shoe.
He's basically like you, or he's like, you were fucking dreaming. And she was like me, where she was like, no, I goddamn fucking wasn't.
It was all a dream. And guess what? That dream, smashed into pieces, is going to make an album off of that dream alone.
And
they're going to call that the album.
The thing that convinces him, I don't know if you remember, but the thing that convinces him in the end is the fact that she knows who Pharrell is, and she knows what he's done.
And his first name, right?
Well, it's his only name.
No, I meant
Sean, yes.
Yeah, I meant Graves. No, actually, no. Sean, he's still who told you that? And then it's Pharrell that convinces him.
I made her work very hard to assure him that it was it's actually real. But there's still some doubt to it. That's the thing. There's no way you can just make it absolutely convincing. There's still room for doubt. He just chooses to believe that she's not lying to him.
Or just gives her the benefit of the doubt for the time being until he can prove otherwise. Because that's something I would do. I'm okay, I'll believe you, but I'm still not going to believe you. There's going to be a little part of me that's this is bullshit, but I'll go along with it for now. Until I can find something to prove you wrong. That your shoe was just stolen by a nurse.
Well, that's the thing. It doesn't matter how it went away.
I know.
Whether it was stolen or whether it just disappeared into the ether, it doesn't matter how it went away. What matters is that the shoe was the only thing there.
Yeah.
That particular shoe. Because even in a coma, she wouldn't know.
It was that particular
that
shoe.
particular shoe.
As you're nearing the end of How to Cure, are you confident with how you'll begin the next one? Like, no?
No. Because I've spent too long in this one. Like, I've spent the better part of 3 years working on this book.
Yeah.
It's always starting it that's difficult. It makes it like because if you really take your time working on a book like you did for False Cathedrals and like I have for How to Cure, False Cathedrals has taken you like 2 years, right?
2 years.
So working on this for 3 years, you working on that for 2 years, like going on because you've already gotten past the beginning.
Yeah.
And so now you have to start all over again, and you have to remind yourself how to start all over again. Like, where can I start this? What's a good opening line? What's
a good way to start the novel? Like, do you start with a bit of description? Do you start with some action? Do you start with dialogue? Like, what do you start with? What's kind of making me ask this question is because, you're writing, multiple series. I'm a standalone novelist. And I was just wondering if it's
Go on.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, all of the books, like, How to Cure is the first in a trio, but I wouldn't call it a series, because ideally each of them will be something that you can read on its own.
Okay. Oh, well, yeah, because, like, How to Cure sort of has, like, its definite ending. I mean, there are a few loose ends left.
There's that in every novel, though, I think.
But there's that in every novel. I mean, even False Cathedrals has those loose ends left untied. In my opinion, any good novel leaves at least something untied, where it's like, well, what would happen if that...
Yeah. Did he go off on his own, or was he really just... Yeah.
Like, what'll happen to this character because of their actions? What'll happen? Like, you have to leave some sort of mystery. And I feel like, though, because, like, a lot of people I've talked to who are readers, not writers, like, I like all my books to have, like, they end with that perfect little bow on top. It's like, so a happy ending.
No, I don't like that end like that.
Or not even happy ending. It's just where everything's resolved. It's like, no, you have to leave.
Some of it.
But the reason I was asking it is, but like you said, the How to Cure trilogy is going to be more like interconnected standalones instead of something like Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings.
That really makes it a series is the fact that we're following. My main character is going to be the same.
Yeah.
And even for the last one, I don't know if the main character is going to be the same. Like, there's going to be, well, it's not much of a spoiler because nobody's read it yet, but, like, she is going to have a son, and that her son is going to take a pretty focal standpoint in the third book.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like at that point, we're almost passing the baton, but I don't even know if I'm going to do anything else with him beyond that book. So it'll definitely be a standalone.
Yeah. But the reason I was asking is, there is that bit of, like, anxiety to starting completely over. Like, will I be able to fucking do this again?
Yeah.
Successfully?
Well, because and I suppose it's a little bit easier for me because I know that I have to continue with Hope and her story, even if it is a kind of a standalone thing. Whereas you just write standalones, and I don't think any of your characters are really that interconnected.
Sort of, but not really with Arcadia and Falls Cathedrals. Like there are names that are
Right.
but they're like spelled differently, or they're maybe they're just brief mentions, but you're getting one character's whole experience within her time spent in a psych ward kind of recontextualizes some of the characters in Arcadia, or even the whole story of Arcadia is just, this was the tall tale that someone told.
Right.
But other than that, there's not really any.
What are you working on now?
Well, I was going to start on either a sort of like, I guess you could call it steampunk, because it does take place in the 1800s to start off with some, mild science fiction-esque elements, where instead of, the Earth getting hotter, it gets suddenly colder and we experience a second ice age. Or it was going to be sort of like this, like, I don't want to call it survival horror novel, because that's more of a video game genre. But it was sort of going to take some elements of the survival horror genre of video games and implement it as a novel. But none of those were really gripping me. So I went with the story that's most similar to False Cathedrals, which deals with that one of the characters is a serial killer, because there was a serial killer. I'm not done killing people, I guess.
Are you feeling a little frustrated?
Yeah. Especially given this past week, because I ordered a proof for False Cathedrals. And
how did that go?
I got an empty fucking package the first time. Like, not even sealed. Like, just empty. Like, there wasn't even, like, because, like, usually, like, with packages that have something in them, you can sort of tell there was something in them, because there's that indentation or, whatever within the package to let you know, like, there was something in here was just taken out. That wasn't the case for this package.
So it was just an empty envelope.
Empty, not even sealed. Like, you could just stick your hand in there without even having to rip it open. And so I'm like, okay, so I called up.
Maybe the delivery guy started reading it because he thought that it would be really good.
Well, that's the thing is, so I ordered another copy. So I ordered the original copy on November 5th.
Right.
And then I waited until the 11th, I got the empty package, and then I'm like, okay, so I got a refund and ordered another proof and be like, okay, I'm not going to put a lot of faith that anything's going to come, but I'll give it another chance just to see, because, I mean, you know how False Cathedrals is formatted. I'm just like, maybe their printers can't handle it, and they're just like, well, we already put in the order, and we said it was going to arrive by this certain day, so let's just send the empty package? Maybe he won't be mad, but
he won't notice.
So I ordered a new one on the 11th, and that didn't get shipped until this past Saturday, the 14th. Yeah, 14th. So, and then as I'm flipping through this book, because you know how in the back of the book it tells you like when your POD book is printed, like it'll tell you which day, the date that it was printed, and whatnot. So I ordered it on the 11th, and then shipped on the 14th. So the print date should be between the 11th and the 14th, or maybe the 13th, whatever, who cares. The back of this book says, I'm going to say Mani, 5th of November, 2020. So this is the book that just never came, and had to wait an extra week to get. So what the fuck?
Somebody did read it then.
Probably. I mean, it was obviously like, it looked like it had been flipped through. Like, not all the way, like about.
Maybe maybe their printers had such a stroke that when they finally came out with the book, these people were like, what the fuck is this
going on? And then they probably just started reading it. It's like, it's actually not that bad. How do you, Jonathan D. Clark or whoever your name is?
You don't mind if I make an album out of this, do you?
Yeah, you don't mind if I make. Shut the fuck up. I'll know if the album is like 10 songs long, one song per chapter, and the overall. Okay, so you know how. Okay, so you said how like How to Cure, it's about hope or no trauma, right?
Trauma.
And then Vampire Bite will be family, and then the one for what it was and not what it is now is about
repair. The third one is about repairing your soul.
Okay, repairing your soul. But as I'm reading through False Cathedrals, looking for any type of those, just an inconsistency here and there, but you know how you said How to Cure, like there's always hope,
right?
And how I said False Cathedrals is like everyone's bound, or not bound, is capable of ugly actions.
Right.
The final line of the final chapter, not including the epilogue, because the epilogue's just, you know, a little extra. I'm realizing that a lot of what the characters are searching for in this novel is hope. And the final fucking line of False Cathedrals chapter 9, not including the epilogue, but the final line of chapter 9 is he fell, still holding hope in his arms. Wait, I think that's the line. Let me double check real quick.
That's the line. That's fucking funny.
Yeah, he fell, still holding hope in his arms. And it's just funny because, like, at least in the first chapter, which is what I'm in right now, everyone's the most kind of like reoccurring word, which people would say is a crutch word, is hope. People are like Regina's hoping her father will come in through the door. Daniel is hoping to not lose the memory of Karen. Abigail's hoping for something. Brian's hoping to not give in to his thoughts. Aiden's also hoping not to, you know, re-give, I guess, into his violent inclinations of the past. And it's just like, oh good God, I'm writing a book where people are looking for hope.
I have it.
And the final narrative shard from a character who is only brought up in that final moment meets a girl named Hope that he went to school with. And something happens where he falls, still holding hope. The person saying that he is holding on.
See, now I feel like I need to give you a little nod with one of the other two books. A hope. You have a hope character.
Yeah.
Well, if she's a person,
yeah.
Does she have any real significance in your mind?
And
as far as False Cathedrals goes, does she have a real significant purpose?
To the character that she interacts with.
But as far as the story goes, no.
As far as the story goes, I'm not going to say yes or no.
Are you gonna bring her back?
In a future novel?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I'm not going to say.
I feel like I'm gonna have to reference though, like just for the sake of, I don't know, not being neat, but because it's funny. If I don't at least reference the side street shooter
in one of your
in
books.
one of my other novels with Hope, then I feel like it won't be making as much an opportunity of the available
Of a crossover.
Not necessarily a crossover, just as a joke.
Well, I would even say don't even call it the side street shooter. Just kind of reference a guy who would shoot people out in public on the street. Don't even say
mass shooters in my book. That could be anyone.
You have mass. Wait. But
somebody, I have a kid who walks into a mall and murders like 50 people.
Mine just goes to a lake.
Yours wasn't making a statement, I think. And that's the whole point of him going, like, it's obviously not about him having a mental break. It's about them needing to make a statement. And, you know, your dad owes me a favor, and that favor's going to be your life, kid. Here's a gun. Yeah. I'll give you some drugs if you really need drugs. Go murder these people. Tell you what, for every person you kill, over 20, if you hit 20 is the bare minimum. If you kill more than 20 people, for every person over 20 that you kill, I'll give your family $10,000.
Move that. And he kills 50.
And he kills 50. Like I think the official number is like 53. With a further 80 injured.
Just make it 54. Five plus 4 is 9.
Shut up. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. But that's... And there are lots of people who are going to go, that's really insensitive. But the fact of the matter is, like, that's how those things are done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. You've told the story that you want to tell.
Yeah.
Like, at that point, you know. Whereas, like, in my case... When I first did my little ebook adventure, I could think, like, I would go through and I'd read it and I'd have to tell myself, stop trying to make it better, just publish it as it is. Because it wasn't a good story. That's the thing that I learned from that. Like, if that's not really the story that you want to tell, then you're going to have some anxiety about telling it. Whereas How to Cure is a story that I wanted to tell. Mm-hmm. So I don't really feel apprehensive about finishing it, and I don't feel apprehensive about hitting that publish button. Because I know that at this time around, I've told the story I want to tell. And I should have listened to my instincts the first time. Shush. I should have listened to my instincts the first time and just not done it. Mm-hmm. But like I said, I was under so much... There was so much stress and there was so much pressure to start doing this thing right now. That was what everyone was expecting of me. And at 18, I hadn't learned to just throw all that shit to the side and tell the story that I wanted to tell.
Yeah.
I don't think you've had that problem with any of your books.
No.
You've told the stories you wanted to tell.
Yeah. Even if there wasn't much of really a story or conventional plot to one of those books.
As long as you told the story the way you wanted to tell it, it didn't really matter.
Didn't matter. But and maybe it's because like my writing process is like so opposite of what I've seen with other people, where people talk about, because you see the post every now and then, someone asking the question, how long does it take you to write your first draft? And I sometimes will see the person who writes their first draft within 2 months, and it's like I could never do that. Even if I sat down and wrote every day, it's not going to be 2 months.
No, because you put too much thought into it. I put too much thought into it.
Like it's going to be even if I still sat down and wrote every day, it's still probably going to be close to 2 years before I finish or write that final sentence.
Why do you think it takes you so long? Hold on.
Okay. So the reason why it takes me so long to write a novel, even if I were to quote unquote write every day, as to where a lot of people concern themselves with, like, just get the story out. Don't worry about like how it's worded, how it's structured. Just, get, the story you want to tell out. And it's like, I can't do that. I've tried. I concern myself not with just getting the story out, but I do concern myself basically to a sentence by sentence structure. Like, I want someone on Twitter who I talk to says that I write very clean first drafts.
Yes.
And it's because I tinker with every sentence. Like, I'll sit in front of the computer and it'll look like I'm being productive because I'm not putting fingers to the keys. I'm not, clanking away. And it may take, 45 minutes or less or more to write that one sentence, but it's because I'm working out. It's not just like, okay, how do I want, what words do I want this sentence to be? I'm also working out like, okay, so I'm not saying there's a flow. I mean, there's a flow to writing. There's always a flow, but like, I'm trying to work out the flow as I'm getting the story written. And that's why I write down, like, essentially, we'll just call it outlining. I outline my stories before I even start writing my stories because it's like, okay, I know it's going to take a while and I don't want to lose that focus with how long it takes.
Right.
So, like, when it comes to, and we've talked about this before with the whole, you got the plotter, you got the pantser, and you've got the hybrid thing, which I just call a lazy plotter. I never wanted to consider myself the plotter.
Right.
Because I never wanted to I never wanted to take myself too seriously. Like, oh, like, it's just, it's got to be like this, but that's how I am. I wanted to think of myself as more of the carefree who didn't care where the story went, but I'm not going to be the one that pretends like, oh, my characters decide it for me. They run the story. No, that's not how it works.
No, that's not how reality works.
It's more of your brain, you came up with a better way to execute the story or found a better trajectory in which your story would go.
Yes.
And you implemented it. And to answer this in the longest form possible, the reason why it takes me so long is as to where, like, you know, Neil Gaiman, care for the author. You know, he says, you know, like the second draft is to go back and make it look like you knew what you were doing all along. Kind of to know what I was doing from the fucking get-go. Like, I don't want to be like, oh, I scribbled down words and it's bare bones and I'm going to go back and I'm going to dress it up. I'm going to make it look pretty now. No, I'm going to take the time for my story to gestate and come out fully formed. I'm not going to give birth to a premature halfling and then have to nurse it in the NICU for months before its lungs can breathe on their own. I like to give birth to a full formed thing.
Yeah. I get what
that only requires the minimal, you know, amount of days to make sure, can it hear, can it see, can it blah 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 blah. So I like to put more work into the creation process and not spend so much time nursing it.
What would you define as being, because if what you do is the creative process, how would you define nursing it?
Nursing is like the creative, like a lot of
shush.
Like a lot of people
Maggie?
that I've seen with their time span of writing a novel, you're basically giving birth to a premature novel. It's not fully formed. Like, you have to go back and you have to, you know, nurse it, which is the editing, it's the rewrites, it's the revisions. And I've never done a rewrite. I don't understand I don't understand people who, I wrote a first draft and now I'm going to completely just rewrite the novel. It's like, so basically you wrote a really long outline. You didn't write a novel. Your first draft is not a novel. Your first draft is basically your outline, and now you're going to actually write your novel.
I mean, in my case, I did literally rewrite it.
Well, yeah, but you handwrite. You do longhand. Then you type it, which I wouldn't, if in that case, I would consider the typing aspect. That's not writing. You're just transcribing it to...
Well, I edit as I put it in.
Well, that's part of your nursing process then.
No, because...
I mean, there's still a nursing process in my case, but it's not, like I said, I'm not having to take my child to the NICU. I'm able to just stay in my room and wait for it to be ready to be discharged.
See, I handwrite everything, but I'll tear up a chapter if I don't like where it's going. And that's the thing that takes me so long, is that it's like, if I don't like how it feels, or if I don't like how the words are coming together, I'll rip it up, throw it away, and start again. And I think, like, for How to Cure, I think on chapter 14, I started it like 8 different times before I finally got the feeling that I wanted to get.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of what you do.
in your head, but I just do it on paper.
Yeah, you do the physical act as to where mine's completely cerebral.
Yeah.
Because I also don't like clutter, which to me longhand would just be clutter. Because once you've transferred...
Yes. But it's also like how I keep track of where certain things are.
Mm-hmm. Now, you say you rip out the chapter if you don't like how it... Do you tear it up immediately, or do you keep it as sort of a... Like, if there was something, maybe one little thing you liked, do you keep it intact until you write that down, or you just fuck it?
No, I tear it up completely. And if I liked that bit of it, then I'll try to work my way back around to it. But if I can't, then I can't.
Okay.
And that's something that you find a lot as a writer, is that you know there are aspects of your writing, there are bits of your draft where it's like you might really like something, but it's not working with the way things are, and you have to throw it out. And everybody makes a big deal about it, but honestly, like, it's what you're doing is a whole piece, and you need the whole piece.
You can't just have a section that's...
You're taking little bits and pieces and putting them together to make one larger piece. And all of those bits have to fit together. And if one of them doesn't fit, it doesn't matter how much you like it, you have to throw it out.
Yeah.
You just do. Because that cohesion is what makes a real story. So that's something that, I had to do, especially with How to Cure, because there were a lot of things that I wanted to do, a lot of things that I wanted to say that I just ended up not being able to say because it was too far off what.
Now those bits that you ended up not using because they were off in terms of not fitting within the context of How to Cure, do you think you'd be able to fit them in either the other two novels, or they just completely just discard?
No, they're just gone.
Okay.
But that's not a bad thing.
It's not. It's not a bad thing at all.
It's not. It's not a bad thing, and it's not a tragic thing. Like it's not a waste.
No.
Because.
And I think like there are a lot of people, like when they kill their darlings, they keep them in a separate file on their computer, or they maybe if they're long-handing it, they keep that page and put it in their drawer. It's like, no, if it's not going to work in the context of the story that you originally had the idea for, it's probably not going to work in anything else. Get rid of it.
Yeah, don't get so attached to your own stuff.
Like the stuff that I cut out of Arcadia, I didn't try to fit it in False Cathedrals, and then the stuff that I cut out of False Cathedrals, I'm not going to try to fit it in one of my other future projects.
No, nor should you.
Do you want me to, end with the excerpt, or what?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll cut it in.
You'll cut it in? All right.
I'll cut it in. But I think you should read us a little bit from False Cathedrals. I think it would be a good preview.
Teaser.
Yeah.
All right. As everyone can recall from my reading of Arcadia, I'm not the best reader out loud, because I try to do things one breath.
Take a deep one. Here we go.
All right. I'm actually going to try to do this by actually taking breaths. Outside her barred window, beyond the trees which led to a rather uncivilized world, Regina Wilson watched the understated colors of twilight bleed into and eventually consume Midtown's skyline. The eon-long cycle of syzygy between the sun, the earth, and the moon continuing to play its well-rehearsed role. She held her journal close to her chest, taking in its secrets. Disappointment filled her lungs, hope nowhere to be found in the air around her. The only time she had welcomed another living person into her world, and honestly as well, laying aside the fabrication which had become a part of her identity to everyone who knew her here. She found herself met with confusion. She had imagined the outcome in a different light. that Daniel would have been able to read the words on the page, see through the madness, and acknowledge the woman underneath the facade she had worn on display in this place for 14 years. Bear witness to the teenage girl who wanted to be reunited with her father. But mental defeat and numerous attempts to break through the sheets of March journal entries, lost in an all-consuming wave of pandemonium. Vulnerability had clawed its way into her lonesome thoughts. Honest sensitivity appeared in an extinct notion, reserved only for those who could share the hallucination. She finally let the journal fall to her lap, allowing the weight to leave her chest. For many shapeless years, her writing had been all she had. Hopes and dreams found sanctuary in the form of words scribbled on the page, her life in letters. The eyes of an outsider would assume it all a disorganized mess, not a coherent thought to be uncovered by even the most patient reader, an unsolvable puzzle designed to leave its audience in a daze. You could waste your entire life looking for an answer and never touch the truth. But for Regina, its humble creator, it told a sincere account of her situation, a literary snapshot, a rather abstract portrait that exposed every broken nerve with such unabashed honesty, masked by questionable insanity.
Significantly shorter than your last.
Yeah, I didn't want to be out of breath by the time I finished. And if I tell any more of that piece, you'll know what's going on, so I'd rather just leave it there.
Well, I think that is a good place to leave it. Because it's definitely like it is a teaser into Regina.
Yeah.
Without giving too much away as to why she is where she is.
Yeah. And what's about to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well done, you.
And she's a character from Arcadia-ish.
We'll see how many people put that together.
I think anyone who reads Arcadia and has, half a brain might make the connection.
Well, I mean, okay, yes. But you don't know if they're going to find false cathedrals first.
That's true. That is very true.
So is this where you want to leave it?
This is where I want to leave it. Anyway, this has been Murder of Crows Podcast. Hope you had fun. No shirtless me this time.
I had fun.
No fun with flags.
No fun with flags. Do the pose.